One of the best loan products available, bar none, is a VA home loan, and it supports those that serve our country. But what about all of those others who serve? Our cops, our teachers, our nurses. What are we doing for them? How are we saying thank you? How are we paying it back? Well, I have a solution. It's called the Helper Act, and you should know about it. And that's what we're going to discuss on today's episode. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children 18 plus, you are tuned in to the Loan Officer Podcast with me, Dustin Owen, and a very special guest. He's not Jesus, but he's from Bethlehem. Today, he resides in Palm Coast, Florida. He is a Marine veteran. He is a 28-year mortgage veteran. And he has written some super awesome legislation that too few know about. And that legislation is called the Helper Act. He is my new friend, Sam Royer. Sam, welcome to Loan Officer Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dustin.
I'm super excited about today. You know, I first heard of you through a friend of a friend. And in fact, you and I were talking off camera. I think it was Randall Gillespie. Shout out to Randall.
Yep.
Where Randall said, hey, do you know this guy, Sam? He's kind of in your market. And for those that don't know the Florida geography, kind of my market is I'm in Orlando, Florida. Sam's up in Palm Coast. On a good day, that's 50 minutes. On a bad day like yesterday, it's like an hour and a half. Yeah. But we're roughly about an hour away from each other, both working and serving the mortgage industry, but hadn't had a chance to meet until today. But today's meeting came about from Paul.
Yep.
Right? So Paul reaches out to me. I can never pronounce Paul's last name. Is it Heidemann?
I think Hinderman.
Hinderman?
I think.
Paul, my apologies for totally butchering your last name, but it's kind of par for the course for me to butcher someone's last name. But Paul literally hit me up on LinkedIn and said, is this something you could get behind?
Yeah.
And he was talking about the Helper Act. And voila, one thing led to another. And you and I are here today to talk about the Helper Act. But I think before we do, Sam, I kind of want to give the audience a glimpse of who is Sam Royer. So we'll start with, how would you describe yourself professionally to either a client or a referral source?
Well, I am somebody just like everybody else that fell into this industry. Nobody goes to high school and says, hey, I want to be a mortgage person. 28 years ago, I literally moved to California and saw a job that said $1,300 a month plus bonus. And I thought, man, I made $1,200 in Marines. This is great. And fortunately, I went to an organization that at the time did 125% loans, if you remember those.
Wow.
I don't know if you're
No, yeah, well, no, you're talking about 1997.
1997.
So I was graduating high school in 97.
Okay.
But that said, I entered the industry in 04.
Okay.
And in 04, we definitely had those, I mean, it's the Ninas, the
125s.
Sissas.
Yep.
Yes.
So I fell into the industry that way, and literally just over the last 28 years, I've been so blessed to meet so many awesome people. And never thought I would have done this 28 years ago. I actually wanted to be a Marine my whole life. I was too immature, too stupid. I got out after pretty much 4 years. I'm 3 years, 10 months to be exact. But it's something that, I found my passion in serving others. So this industry allows you to do a lot of that.
Yeah, it's funny. You taught me, I was today years old when you said, Dustin, you can't call me an ex-Marine.
Yeah.
An ex-Marine means you got kicked out, dishonorably discharged more than likely.
Ex-wife, ex-husband, that's a bad.
Okay, it's a bad thing to be an ex. So you are a Marine veteran.
Correct, because former Marine, you never lose the title. Marines, that's the one thing we're known by is that, when you're given that, there's actually a ceremony at boot camp when you get your EGA, which is Eagle, Globe, and Anchor, and you are a Marine for the rest of your life.
Yep. So like you went to Paris Island, you went through boot camp, you graduated, you're a Marine.
You're a Marine.
Congratulations. And
now, if you get kicked out, you smoke weed or something, then you're an ex-Marine.
Even still today, they don't let you smoke weed?
No weed in the Marines.
Oh, that's no fun.
No, it's good.
You're like, nah, it's good. So, but your first career was serving our country, right? Starting at age 18.
17, actually.
17. Wow.
I turned 18 in boot camp.
Okay.
I had Firewatch. Yeah, it was awesome.
So you graduated high school, went straight in.
I did.
Yeah. And
6 days after I graduated.
6 days.
Yeah.
Did you come from a family of?
No, not at all.
No.
My junior year, my dad, I called him at work. I said, I think I'm going to go to Marines. He goes, that's a good idea. And that was it.
And you went to high school with someone that most of us know.
Yeah.
Right? Who'd you go to high school with?
So I was a freshman. He was a senior, but I went to high school with Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
With The Rock. That's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
And he didn't, look, I've seen him a couple times since those days. It's not like he walks up and says, "Hi, Sam." So I never want to take kind of stolen valor in that sense. But he's always been so kind every time I've ever run into him. I ran into him in Anaheim before he was mega famous. I'll never forget that. I ran into him then at the Daytona 500 just recently.
Okay. And then from a production standpoint, I think the audience should know, like, you are an active originator. Like, I looked up your volume. You're doing $2, $3, $4 million a month as an active originator. And now, as an originator, are you focused primarily on first responders, on active duty, on retired military? Like, what does your book of business look like?
So I mean, I serve anybody, but the fact is people do lean towards, hey, Sam, Marine, VA, first responder because of everything I've done. I've lost business because they say, "Oh, I thought you only did VA." And that's like, Now, granted, I run a company called Salute Home Loans, and obviously through that name, some people think it's just for that. But when you look at a hand salute, there's a simple thing that I look at is that, anywhere you go in the world, when you salute somebody, you're showing them honor, you're showing them respect, you're also yielding to them. You're saying, I'm humbling myself. So I think honoring people that not only serve our country, which I'm very proud of doing, but also our community, be it the teacher, the firefighter, the police officer, and so forth.
So walk me through the Helper. Walk me through the Helper Act.
Okay.
When and how did you come up with this, and I'm going to call it a vision, this vision that today we know as the Helper Act? And then what I want to walk the audience through is how they can participate, support, get behind, help advocate for the Helper Act.
Yeah.
But I want to, before we get into that, I'm just curious because I don't know this yet. When did it come upon you that this was needed?
Well, the days that you and I as originators, we sit across from those people or talk to them on a Zoom now, and they don't have the money to afford a house.
And when we're saying they, we're talking police officers, we're talking firefighters, EMTs. Are you putting nurses and teachers in there as well? Or?
So teachers are. So we just we carbon copied our already existing legislation called the Good Neighbor Next Door program. So HUD already defines under the Good Neighbor Next Door program first responder and teacher in that. So we just carbon copied it. Would I love to have 911 operators, nurses, and others? Of course I would.
Corrections officers?
They are in there.
They are in there already.
Yeah, because you look at even Florida, a lot of corrections are under the sheriff's office. So, but you go to Pennsylvania where I'm from, actually, corrections aren't under the sheriff's office in a lot of senses. So, but they are in this legislation. So we just carbon copied because when you're trying to work in Washington, when you already have existing legislation, it's a lot easier to get past and adding on to. Now, do we think this could expand down the road? Of course. I mean, VA started, it was really only for World War II veterans. So, think about it. You're a World War I veteran, but you can't get a VA loan, back in the day.
No way.
Yeah.
I was today years old when I think I was reminded of that. I'm sure I had to learn that for a test somewhere back in 2004, 20 years ago now. But I was today years old when I was reminded that in the very beginning, the only people who could get a VA home loan were those that served in World War II.
Yeah.
So Korean War, no bueno, and World War I, no bueno. And maybe if you even go back to like whatever war was before World War I, I'm sure we were in some kind of a squabble back in the late 1800s, right? Yeah.
Spanish American.
Spanish American, is that what it was?
Yeah.
I was trying to think. I mean, obviously it wasn't the War of 1812. That would have been, further back. Yeah. Civil War, probably too far back, but there could have been Spanish American War before we went to World War I. Okay, so that's interesting that there is already legislation that's in place, and it's under the Department of Housing and Urban Development, aka HUD. But what does that current legislation do? Because I've been a lender for 20 years, and I'm not familiar with any special loan programs through HUD that are for first responders.
Well, the Good Neighbor Next Door program, what it does, it takes HUD homes, and basically, if you're a cop, teacher, or firefighter, you can go buy a house at half price. So
half price or
correct
half price.
Yeah, half price. So it's not a mortgage program. It's literally just a program where it is a mortgage program too. But when you are on the HUD foreclosure list, right? And if you honestly look in the state of Florida, I bet you if we looked it up right now, there might be 30 homes.
I was going to say, so it has to be a home being sold by HUD, which there's few and far between.
You got it.
Okay. Yeah. So that's what it is.
It
so
looks really nice on paper. It doesn't really do much.
How much legislation is actually that way,
A
right?
lot.
Where it's great public relations, which is in the sales side. I call it all sizzle, no substance.
Yeah.
So the good neighbor next door, one could say, it's a lot of sizzle, minimal substance, only because it's only for homes that are owned by HUD. And currently, HUD doesn't own that many homes. In fact, if you looked it up, even in a state like Florida, where it's like the third most populous state, there may only be as little as 30 homes for sale.
Correct.
At which point, if I'm a first responder and I want one of those homes through the good neighbor next door, I could potentially buy that for
Half price.
half price. Now, is half price half of what HUD has it listed for, or is half price half of what it's currently appraised for, which could still be more than what HUD has into that home?
That's a good question. I'd have to look it up because in 28 years, I've never done one.
Yes, well, exactly. It's one of those.
Yeah.
It's there's a lot of legislation that came out, especially post 2008, where it sounded great on paper and it sounded great in the legislation that was signed off on.
Yeah.
But if those legislators really knew what you and I knew from being in the trenches with our borrowers and the homeowners, I'm like, no one's going to be able to match or meet all of this requirement. All these requirements.
It's good that we don't hear about it. That means there's not a lot of foreclosures, but just like the 203H program right now, everybody's heard of it recently. Nobody knew it existed, but because we've had so many natural disasters, now all of a sudden it's like, oh, 203H, this new program. It's been around for a long time. It just isn't something that's utilized that much.
Yeah, and we actually did a show probably a few months back as we were going through the hurricanes that came through Florida and the Carolinas. 203H, which is different than 203K, which is different than 203B, which is crazy because all three are FHA loans.
So Helper actually, from my understanding, would have been a 203Z. They already actually gave it a little letter there.
Okay, so then getting back to the initiation or the birth of this idea, how far back does your vision go for the Helper Act? Like, is this something that you started 2 years ago or something you started 20 years ago?
No, it's been about 4 or 5, actually more than 4 years. But basically, I was just sitting with borrowers, and it was a struggle for me when my best friends are cops. I never served in combat. They're getting shot at, having knives pulled and stuff, and they couldn't buy a house as affordably as I could. So I took it upon myself. Now, when I say I wrote the legislation, I didn't physically write it. What I did was I came up with the concept. I came up with the outline, and then all the legal beagles in Washington basically wrote out the bill. They send me the bill, say, hey, Sam, is this good? And that's where I'm not a congressman or senator. I say, yes, it looks great. And then the congressman or senator says, hey, let's roll. So a couple years ago, I started approaching different leaders. Val Demings in Orlando was the first one I tried to reach out to. Unfortunately, she never got back to me, which is very unfortunate. But then I actually approached Michael Waltz, who was my local congressman. He was actually very hip to it, but he also was a freshman in Congress, so he was just getting in. And I knew there were a lot of legislative things under the military that he truly backs. He is on the Helper Act. But weirdly enough, I had an advertiser call me and say, hey, man, I know you're trying to get this legislation done. I'm going clay shooting with this congressman. You want to go? I'm like, sure. I hadn't shot a shotgun in 20 years. And so I had to borrow a shotgun from a Daytona cop to go clay shooting with Congressman John Rutherford of Jacksonville, Florida. This man served in law enforcement over 40 years. He was a sheriff, actually 3 terms, I believe, in Jacksonville, Florida. We went clay shooting. As a Marine, I'm very disappointed. I missed about half. He missed 1. And this man, just an honorable man. And I look at honor as, there's a lot of people that are posers in the world, where they jump in, take selfies with famous people and everything else. Well, he's the kind of man that he gets asked to be in pictures because there's so much respect. One of the greatest things I love about him, when I walk around Washington with Congressman Rutherford, everybody still calls him sheriff. It could be a senator, it could be a congressman, it could be Capitol Police. They're like, hey, sheriff, because that was his true love. So I didn't really pitch him that day. I did talk to his chief of staff, who's a retired colonel in the Army, and I told him the concept. He said, yeah, just get on a Zoom call. And I wasn't his constituent, so he didn't really have to meet with me. But being somebody that we kind of bonded a little bit, the next week, now this is 2020, we had a Zoom call. And it literally took about 120 seconds where I was talking to him. I said, sir, my best friends are cops. I said, I have a struggle that they can't buy a house as affordably as I could. And we talked a little bit more. And he said, Sam, let me stop you. He said, 2 times I borrowed money from my parents. And this is the 70s. My first kid in my first house, he said, let's roll. And that was it.
Wow. And I love what you stand for because, like, as an originator, I would tell people a VA home loan is my favorite loan product to originate, bar none. In fact, I can go so granular. You know my favorite client? My favorite client is a husband and wife, so I have dual income.
Yep.
They have good credit, not great credit. They both work usually at TSA because they're both ex-military.
Yeah.
And they both have their VA benefits. Their combined income's probably $150 a year. They have good credit, not great credit, and they're going to utilize their VA benefits for 100% financing.
Yeah.
And it's a clientele that A, is grateful. B, they listen, right? Meaning that they're good to work with because they play by the rules. And C, I can bring them tons of value.
Yeah.
And for the most part, their loan isn't one that's so paperwork intensive that it ties up the resources of me and my entire team for months at a time.
Yeah.
But the VA home loan, A, it's the best financial instrument for those that don't know. Like, think about this: 100% financing, no monthly mortgage insurance. Okay, that right there makes it one of the most affordable as it compared to an FHA or even a conventional loan with 3 or 5% down. Now, you and I know this, but so much of our audience may be real estate agents or they may be home buyers where we're teaching them something right now. But then here's what even mortgage professionals don't know. You and I know it, but they probably don't. Look at the performance of a VA home loan. You're talking about, we're giving $1 million sometimes at 100% financing, meaning no money down. And these loans, VA home loans, are performing at the highest level compared to all other loan products. So your idea, which is like, look, if we're doing this for active duty and as well as military veterans, why shouldn't we also be doing it for cops, firefighters, EMTs, and teachers?
When normally
it's the same
a cheaper
product.
rate too.
Well, and a lot of times a cheaper rate and easier to qualify. Like a VA home loan is one of the easier loans to qualify for. It's one of the most common sense underwrites. Yes, and 100% financing and no monthly mortgage insurance. Now it does have a funding fee, and that funding fee helps fund the program.
But more than 51% of military members or veterans now have some kind of service connected, so there's not even that.
Correct. And by service connected, I mean they're receiving disability income from something that transpired during their service.
I was 45 and I finally got mine.
There you go. So you don't have to pay your funding fee.
Nope, not
and for
anymore.
those that don't know, the VA home loans have funding fees, and their funding fees vary from first time use to subsequent use. It even varies if you were, I think, a certain type of reservist versus active duty. But nonetheless, if you receive any type of service-related disability, then you don't have to pay that funding fee. At which point, you would think through the Helper Act, if you're able to basically design a government-backed loan program, by the way, FHA loans, VA loans, USDA loans are all government-backed.
Correct.
So a government-backed loan that mirrors a lot of VA, but we're going to do it for first responders.
Correct.
That's
And
essentially and teachers. And that essentially is what you're advocating for. That's what we're asking you to advocate on our behalf. Like, go to the website, check out the Helper Act, figure out how you can get involved, and start asking yourself, who do you know that knows, either a congressperson or a senator, that we can start getting this legislation and this idea in front of? Now, is the act currently written, and is it in front of anyone in the House and the Senate?
So let's get down to some nuts and bolts with that, because this was introduced 4 years ago in the 117th Congress. At that point, we got a little under 90 congressional leaders, men and women, on the bill. We had 17 U.S. senators.
And I'm assuming this is as bipartisan as they come because it's housing related.
Well,
I cannot imagine
it's interesting.
It's a partisan issue.
It's interesting because I've learned a lot, let's say, in the last couple of years. So at that point, it was about 60-40, Democrat to Republican.
I mean, in today's day and age, I mean, that's great.
Yes. It was great. But unfortunately, at that time, we had Senator Pat Toomey, who was the head of Senate Banking, and he actually was my U.S. Senator in Pennsylvania. Well, I'll never forget being on a call with him, and there were a bunch of sheriffs and the head of the firefighters union on the bill, or not on the bill, on the call. And he said, quote, if cops want to get paid more, they need to go to their local municipality. And that's when I really learned about government.
Wow, paid more.
Yeah.
We're not asking them to pay them more.
Well,
we're
that
asking them
just
to
shows you how much they know about legislation. A lot of times you're talking to them about, so you have to be really a lot more granular when you're talking.
Yes.
So that was 117th Congress. We then got it introduced in the 118th Congress. Now, the coolest part of that was at that point, the House or the Senate flipped and it was Democratic led. And we actually got the chairman of Senate Banking on the bill, which we thought, this is awesome. Gangbusters, let's go. So we just are ending the 118th Congress right now. And as it stands, we have, I believe, 31 or 32 U.S. senators. And we have almost 150 congressional leaders, be it Democrat or Republican. Now, Democrats or Republicans, it's about 70, 75 Democrat to about 25, 30 Republican. And the biggest problem we've had is politics.
Mm-hmm.
We've had situations now, Senator Tim Scott, who now will be the head of Senate Banking this next Congress, was the majority on Senate Banking. And unfortunately, we believe because of politics, it just didn't really go anywhere. Now, we've also had, a lot of Republicans, and I'm a registered Republican, but a lot of Republicans don't like 100% financing. They don't like the fact that the government is involved. Mm-hmm. But the problem is that, unfortunately, if you look at just the history of, like you said, VA financing, it's one of the best performing loans out there. The Helper Act, back in 2006, now I was in the industry a little under 10 years. You were just getting into it. The 2006 downturn happened because of fraud and basically because of fraud.
Agreed. And lots agreed. Starting at Wall Street.
Yep.
Wall Street greed.
Totally.
Street
Everybody actually agreed. So when you look at now, after the Dodd-Frank Act and other things, how many times we verify employment? And who is most likely to keep their jobs no matter pandemic or economic downturn? Yeah. Cops, firefighters, teachers,
yes.
Right? So we've teed up a program that literally really honors not only those individuals, but also as far as any kind of risk standpoint, for FHA, this is a good pool of loans that we're putting together where if you look at even FHA financing, they're putting 3.5% down, but then they're financing the mortgage insurance. So really it's 98.25% financing. We're asking the federal government to extend coverage of 1.75% where their monthly payment is cheaper every month. You think this should fly through Congress, but that's not how Washington works.
No, but they'll definitely fly that flag that says we back our boys and girls in the blue as long as I don't have to vote on it.
Yeah.
Right? As long as it's just, if I have to fly the flag, I'll fly the flag.
It's not even vote on it. It's even let it get to the point to be voted on. So as an example.
Oh, so they're stopping it. So you can't find two co-authors or three.
Oh, we have them. The problem is Washington works where you have Washington as a group, and then you have, everybody has a different committee. Appropriations deals with money. You have, national defense, that's armed services, right? So you have banking in the Senate and financial services in the House. Well, you have a thing called a chairman and the senior ranking member. So now we're getting the next Congress. We will have Republican chair, French Hill from Arkansas, and we'll have Tim Scott from South Carolina. They will be the head of House Financial Services and Senate Banking. Then you have the junior, or I say junior, that's the wrong term, but the minority leader. So from my understanding in the House, it'll be Maxine Waters from California, and you will have, I believe, Elizabeth Warren. I forgot where she's from, but Massachusetts. So you will have them. Those individuals, those two leaders, have to basically agree on things and allow things to come to fruition. So as an example, this last Congress, Senator Rubio and actually Senator John Ossoff from Georgia, Republican and Democrat, they put the Helper Act into a thing called the National Defense Authorization Act. Now, that is the must-pass bill. If people don't understand what that is, that means it has to pass.
It just passed last month.
Correct.
But,
actually last week. Or was it last week?
I think it was last.
Yeah.
But you know what wasn't in there? The Helper Act, nor the trigger lead bill.
Well, the trigger lead was in one side.
Okay.
Again, remember, there's two sides,
Yes.
the House and the Senate.
Correct.
So here, the Senate side of the Helper Act was supposed to go in there. Senator Sherrod Brown from Ohio, the chairman, would allow it in, but Senator Tim Scott did not.
Wow. And Brown lost re-election.
Correct. And that's why we believe that the Helper Act also didn't get as much look from the Republican side, because they didn't want Chairman Brown to win.
Because it all comes down to politics.
It does come down to politics.
It all comes down to politics. What about the Mortgage Bankers Association? Have you been able to get, whether it's Bill Kilmer or Bob Broke-Schmidt or any of those men and women up at 1919 M Street in D.C., are they supporting the Helper Act?
They are. Bill Kilmer has been a great gentleman to talk to. And definitely MBA has not given us a letter of support. They did come back and tell me that, they didn't like a portion of the bill that talked about attestation. But then I kind of went back and said, well, guys, attestation, I said, when somebody brings their employment documents, we do a verification of employment, then we do another verification of employment 10 days prior to closing, kind of takes care of everything. Again, I know this was offline, but we kind of talked about how a lot of organizations, I feel, haven't gotten behind it because they haven't had their 2 cents into writing the legislation. You got to understand, Helper.
Everybody wants to be able to have their thumbprint
correct
somewhere to be seen
correct
on the Helper Act.
Well, it's the same thing with National Association of Realtors. They will not be opposed to the Helper Act, but they will not give a massive amount of support because the first Congress, 117th, they don't want to piss off Maxine Waters because she had an equity inclusion bill that had 40 Democrats and no Republicans, but Helper was like 60-40, but they didn't want to push. And look, I might get a lot of kickback from this, but at the end of the day, the Helper Act has over 500 national, statewide, local organizations. And when I say local especially, sheriffs, mayors, people that are leaders in their community saying we need affordable housing. This is perfect for a small sect of our community that we can help.
But these are the community members that don't leave because they're working 20, 30 years to get that pension.
Correct.
They're making subsidized incomes for the sole purpose of giving back to their community and serving it, but also because they understand if they work long enough, they'll receive a pension.
Correct.
So these are the people you want to support. These are the people that, if I, who I've never served, neither in the military or as a teacher or a cop, if I have to pay an extra $300 a month for housing, I'm more transient. I'm more willing to pick up and move to St. Pete or move to North Carolina or Colorado, unlike my friends who are cops, who are firefighters, who are looked to actually like stay in that community, which means their money stays there, their tax dollars stay there. So of course the mayors would be supporting this. So you said you have over 500 supporting it, but unfortunately we have to cut through the red tape and the bullshit.
Well, Senator Rubio said it best. He said, when people that serve in their communities have to buy houses outside their communities, it makes a community less safe. It makes a community less stable. And that's where I really appreciated his leadership. Now he's leaving the Senate, so we have to find a new Republican member. And that's really like where we're at right now. The thing that is really been a hard fight for me is that I have a lot of passion in this because I came up with it. And I think, this isn't the Sam Royer bill. This is a bill for all mortgage professionals, be it mortgage brokers, mortgage bankers, credit unions, anybody that lends in the FHA space. This gives us the opportunity to go to our communities. And this is for all the listeners out there, all the people. You get to go to a firehouse, a police station, a school, and say, hey, we're advocates. We are ambassadors to try and help get legislation done to serve you better by giving you a cheaper mortgage. At that point, there are some people that are out there using Helper to just sell. Advocacy, people will either know in your heart that you're real. And that's where we've gotten so much support because this has truly been a heart mission. And the fact that a lot of the national organizations, we hope this next Congress, they will join on because Julia Gordon, the commissioner of FHA, or I believe that's her correct title, but she was amazing. I had a call with her, about a 30-minute Zoom call. And I'll never forget, I was very nervous. I've met General Mattis. I've met The Rock. I've met a lot of awesome people, but I was nervous for her meeting for some reason. And my daughter's name is Julia, so I tried to play that card. I'm like, oh, my daughter's name's Julie. I love your name. And she goes, Mr. Roy, can I just say something real quick? And I said, what's that? And she said, I just want to say thank you. And I was a little taken off. I was in Arizona. I'm sitting there and I'm like, and she goes, so many people talk about affordable housing, but nobody actually does anything about it. And she said, what I've seen you and your team do, which the reserve component is our lobbying firm in Washington, what George, his team, and you have done, nobody's come close to this. And I think sometimes with some of the organizations, we want partners. We want people to come on board and help us because we can't do this alone. I mean, we've gotten to this point, but it's those that are probably going to help us get over that finish line.
And now, a word from our sponsors. Attention mortgage companies. Have you ever thought about being a show sponsor? What about an advertiser? In 2025, we're going to do something we've never done before. We're going to give you that opportunity to sponsor an episode or to advertise on our platform. But here's the catch. We only have room for 5 advertisers every month, and we only have room for 4 show sponsors. So if you're interested in becoming a show sponsor or an advertiser, go to our website, tloponline.com, request a consultation, and one of my team members will help you decide whether or not show sponsorship or advertising would make sense for you.
And that's where we're at in the now 119th Congress. The Helper Act will be reintroduced. So the website you talked about.
Yeah, I would say, so if people want to get involved, if they want to partner, if they want to help advocate for this passion that you're putting out there, where do they go?
So basically, passthehelperact.org.
Passthehelperact.org.
Yeah, there is another site out there that is a commercial site, which isn't the correct one. So passthehelperact.org. Now, the website, we are sitting right now in 2024. In 2025, beginning of January, once we know who the original sponsors will be, we will have the website up and running again. Okay. Right now, the website is the old version, the 118th Congress. Yep. So definitely go there and look at stuff, but you will see some transitions happening because we have new players. Marco Rubio's not in the Senate anymore. We have to find a new Republican member. We are working on getting a couple new original sponsors for the House side, right? So once that Call It Foundation is reset, then we're going to go out, and at that point, anybody in the communities that want to, or in the country that want to help serve, they just have to reach out. We will give them the tools, the letters, we will give them the scripting, we will give them everything so they could go knock on a mayor's door, a sheriff's door, a fire chief's door, a principal's door to say, hi, my name is Judy Bloom. I am a mortgage lender, but I'm not here to solicit you for mortgages. I'm just here to let you know there is a bill called the Helper Act where all your educators, all your firefighters, all your police officers will have a better benefit when they buy a house. And it's as simple as I'm just trying to get a letter of support from you so that we can let the local congressman, the 2 state senators, or when I say state, U.S.
Correct.
state senators, know that you are in support of this. That grassroots effort is where we can go to Senator Tim Scott and say, Senator, we have over 1,500 letters of support. We could say to Congressman French Hill from Arkansas, or Chairman Hill now, Chairman, we have this much support, and at those types of numbers, that's where people have to start listening. And look, I've been in front of many of the leaders in Washington. Nobody has ever hit me with anything. And it's not because I'm Superman, or you said Jesus from Bethlehem, or I'm not. I'm just a simple guy that has a passion, but there's no numbers people can hit us with to say why this would hurt us. This doesn't cost taxpayers money. This doesn't hurt you politically, and it doesn't hurt our economy or even the FHA pool. Is we had one organization try and write how there is a housing supply shortage, which there definitely is. But here's my question. If we suddenly shift 5 million houses on the market, 10 million houses, if people can't afford it, what the hell does it matter? Right now in Orlando, Florida, where we're sitting, I'm trying to help a young educator. This is a son of one of my best friends I grew up with in Pennsylvania. That young man makes a very decent wage. But when I say a decent wage, he can't afford a house on his own. Yeah. His mom has to co-sign if she's able to for him to buy a house in the community he's trying to serve. He's a single educator. Yep. And that's just sad.
Yeah. Have you reached out to the people over at Housing Wire? Clayton, Diego, James,
I actually was
Kleiman?
on. Yeah, they've been all of them have been very good at, they actually had me on in the past, and it's been 4 years. So I try and remember everybody I've talked to. I think everybody I've talked to, number one, I want to say thank you, because many people I've talked to, it's been such a wild ride the last 4 years. I mean, people walk up to me, they're like, "Hey, Sam," and I'm like, "Hi." Yeah. I'm not sure where I know
what.
him from.
And I had one question. We have to find a way to wrap this up too. When for the Helper Act to actually be signed into law, do you have written into that legislation that someone's going to have to serve X amount of years before they would be eligible? The way that the VA home loan is, and I'm curious. What is that timeline? Like, how long would I have to be a teacher for, a cop for, a firefighter for, before I'd be eligible for this product?
That's a great question. So basically, the Helper Act, actually, I'll just give simple bullet points. It is an FHA loan.
Yep.
100% financing, no monthly mortgage insurance. There is an upfront mortgage insurance premium. We don't know.
That can probably be financed in.
It cannot be financed in.
It cannot be financed
because
in.
FHA, actually, there is legislative... from our understanding, there's legislation that says FHA cannot go over 100%.
Fair enough. Okay.
So what happens, though, is that the number we're using is 3%. And then they do have to serve 4 of the last 5 years as a teacher or a first responder. And teacher is defined as pre-K through 12. As a first responder, it has to be a full-time first responder. So firefighters, there's a lot of volunteer firefighters in the world. However, firefighter reserves is different than like the military reserve. The military reserve, there's a point system that they clearly keep track of. In the fire departments, all the states do it differently. So we couldn't quantify how to actually calculate that. So full-time firefighters. And as long as you serve 4 of the last 5 years, the one thing that was a change from the 117th to the 118th Congress was it is now a first-time homebuyer program, which the legislation has yet to be written for the 119th Congress by who knows what it's going to be, but it's most likely going to stay roughly the same.
Awesome. No, thank you for those details. And again, for the audience, if someone wants to connect with you individually, how do I connect with Sam?
You can just email me, sam@salutehomeloans.com, or call.
And then the website again to support and learn more about the Helper Act.
So it's www.passthehelperact.org.
And then this will be dropping in January. This episode that we're recording today will be dropping in January. Yeah. Your website should be rebooted by the end of January, February. Yeah, because we still need to get the 119th Congress to be.
Well, what'll happen is the Congress will come in January. And then during this time, I mean, we're still working with people. So hopefully we'll have, in the Senate, we got to find one Republican, which we have some that we believe will be good leaders. But on the House side, we already have the Democrat and Republican. We're trying to find another Democrat and Republican. Now, what we're trying to do. And
these would be the bill sponsors.
Correct.
Like
the main
you're looking for the main sponsors for both the House and the Senate. Because if we go back to 6th grade social studies, we know that in order for a law to become a law, it starts as a bill in the House, a bill in the Senate. Then they come together. They both get approved. It goes to the president then signs. Right? I mean, then it becomes law.
2 things I do really want to point out, though, is one.
Unless Elon Musk vetoes it, then you're SOL. President Elon.
Marco Rubio and Senator John Ossoff, both great leaders. Senator Rubio obviously is no longer going to be a senator. We're trying to find actually somebody that's on the committee. When they're not on banking or financial services, it's kind of like it's kind of like being the Monday morning quarterback in a way where you don't have as much power, but you can give some good insight, I guess. That's where we kind of struggled a little bit, and we want to get more financial services and banking
So
people.
There's our ask. Yeah. Who do you know that knows someone who is on either the financial services or banking committee in Congress? And if you know someone who knows someone, reach out to Sam. He could use your help. This bill could use your help.
Well, the other thing, I'm going to throw it out there. President Trump is very aware of the Helper Act. There is zero doubt. I've had enough sheriffs and actually very close friends of his bring up the Helper Act. In fact, during the election, I was very vocal to the RNC about the Helper Act. So President Trump even sending letters to the White House saying, get this somewhere. If he decides to tell Tim Scott, hey, why isn't this at my desk yet? That's going to sway Tim Scott in a lot of ways. Same thing with Congress or Chairman French Hill. Same type of thing. Sometimes top down. But I did serve under General Mattis. He was my regimental commander as a colonel. He became Secretary of Defense. I'll never forget walking into that my meeting with my battalion commander, and he's like, "Why is a colonel calling for a corporal?" Well, they thought I was dropping dimes, but I wasn't. I was trying to become an officer in the Marine Corps. Well, here, sometimes you just got to go to the top. And I think at this point, President Trump is aware of the Helper Act. The more support we get in these first 4 to 6 months, the more, if I'm able to meet with President Trump, it's highly unlikely the Helper Act isn't going to go anywhere.
Gotcha. Awesome.
That's a big ask, but it's, hey.
No, Sam, I love it. And I love that you're doing this for all communities, right? For the first responder community, the real estate community, the housing community, the mortgage community, right? Yeah. You're advocating for all of us. And more power to you. Whatever we can do here at TLOP to continue to support you, please know we will. Y'all, connect with Sam. Check out his website. You now know of the Helper Act. Figure out how you can help get the Helper Act approved. On that note, he's Sam Royer. I'm Dustin Owen. You've just tuned in to Loan Officer Podcast. That's all the time we have for you today, but we do look forward to catching you on the next episode. Peace.